Hello, welcome, and thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today, let's spend a few minutes with Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert. This book was originally published back in 1969, and I read an AudioRenaissance audio version of this book from 2007. So, Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert is the second of the Dune series novels. I recently chatted the first in the series, simply called Dune, and I will link to that chat down in the details below. But I got interested in this series again due to the film adaptation coming up from Denis Villeneuve, and that trailer really got me interested in this series again, which I had never finished. I had read the first in the series and one of the other novels, but it's been so long ago I didn't remember anything about it very much, and so I just decided to read through these first 6 of these novels written by Frank Herbert himself. So I want to be really careful in this chat about Dune Messiah to not give away anything that I think would detract from a first-time reader of either Dune Messiah or Dune, the original book. So what I thought I would do is just read from the blurb that's on Amazon so that you would sort of get an idea of what's going on in the book, and this would be the information that you would see if you were just shopping for the book. So it says, Dune Messiah continues the story of Paul Atreides, better known and feared as the man christened Muad'Dib. As emperor of the known universe, he possesses more power than a single man was ever meant to wield. Worshipped as a religious icon by the fanatical Fremen, Paul faces the enmity of the political houses he displaced when he assumed the throne, and a conspiracy conducted within his own sphere of influence. And even as House Atreides begins to crumble around him from the machinations of his enemies, the true threat to Paul comes to his lover Chani and the unborn heir to his family's dynasty. So yeah, it's very much a lot of political intrigue in this novel. This is a continuation of the first novel, Dune. The action takes place about 12 years after the events of the first novel, Dune, and many of the same characters are also reappearing. So I won't go into that too much, but I think it would be important. I don't think this book would necessarily stand alone by itself very well. I think you would definitely probably need to read the first of the novels because this really does feel like a continuation really of that. So, just a few things about the novel. So I thought I would just touch base on some of the most interesting aspects that I found from the novel without giving, again, anything much about the plot away. But so, there are these, in this world this is a far distant human collection of planets. There's multiple, I guess hundreds of planets that humans live on. And they have decided, though, to forego artificial intelligence. So this is due to something that happened in their past. And so how they've compensated for this, because how can you do faster than light travel, right, without artificial machine intelligence? Well, the answer that they have come up with is they've altered themselves. So this is very kind of complicated, that we get glimpses of to what they've done is in order to do this. But one of the main drivers of this is spice, which I talked about in book 1, so I won't go into much here. Spice is a natural resource that's only found on Arrakis, and it causes prescience in human minds, so a certain degree of prescience. And the Space Guild controls all the sort of transportation. So they are a powerhouse. The House Atreides, so there are multiple houses of power. There's an emperor, as I've mentioned. And then in this novel, there is a house a power structure called the Talaxu. And so I thought this was really interesting because the Talaxu really have focused a lot of their culture is focused on biological manipulation of humans, So they have these things called face dancers, which are basically shapeshifters. So some of them, if they have this ability, if they've been altered to have this ability, can change their appearance really at will. And so they can look like almost anyone or anything that they not. I don't know if they can look like anything, but they can look like anyone. They can change their appearance, as I mentioned. So I thought that was really cool. And then they also have this technology that's sort of like, it's not really raising a person from the dead, but when a person dies, if they get to the body fast enough, they can reanimate that body. That person doesn't have memories of their previous life. They are called a Gola. And then that person can kind of be programmed the way the Talaxu want to have them programmed. And so sort of mentally manipulated in that way. So I thought that was really interesting. So Paul, so one of the main things about this book, as I mentioned, is political intrigue. And Paul, as discovered in the first book, has the ability to see into the future. So because of various events and his genetics, as well as spice, that I talked about in the first chapter, or that's talked about and explained in the first book, he has this ability. But, so one thing that I've thought about, like reading this book, is what a burden that would be, and what a burden it is for Paul. So he's able to see like futures. So, like free will, will set, like if there's multiple futures, and so with each decision that gets made, the future is shifting. So the future is shifting really all the time based on people's choices, but yet there are certain things off into the future that can't be avoided because they've already been set. So the trajectory that we're all on is leading in that direction, and so it can't be changed. What can be changed around it sometimes is the severity or the strength of it, right? And so Paul spends a lot of his energy trying to uncover this. And as the empire is a difficult thing to hold together because of the far-flung human civilizations, he's at the head of the Fremen, who have decided that they see him as a messiah in addition to being, their political leader. And so that has unleashed both a military and a political force on the civilizations of humans that has never been seen before. And so Paul is sort of sitting at the helm of that and really trying to drive that process the best he can. To me, that's really an interesting aspect, though, of this whole series. And then the Dune Tarot. I wanted to talk a bit about the Dune Tarot. This was not in book 1, but this is in book 2. It's mentioned several times, and there's a tarot that has come out, and it really bothers Paul and his sister Aliyah. Aliyah is Paul's younger sister, who was born in the first book, and she is by this point a teenager in this book. But she has some very interesting sort of skills due to the manner of her birth back in book 1, and her sort of connection to the Bene Gesserit, which is a sisterhood of sort of a secret society of women that have the thousands of years of history, and they manipulate a lot of things among the royal houses. I explained that kind of in book 1. I won't go into that here. But Aaliyah is very concerned about the Dune Tarot. Paul's very worried about it too. The Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit, who is sort of an enemy of Paul in this novel, the second one, she uses it, but I kind of put a lot of energy and thought in, like, why would they be so worried about the Dune Tarot? And then I thought, spice actually gives everybody a little bit of prescience, and then if they use this tool, it helps to hone that skill. So most people don't have the skills necessary to use the spice in its ability to give people a bit of prescience, any aspect of to impact their life. But Paul, is trying to hold this very complex web together, and I think the Dune Tarot is very concerning, because if a little bit of knowledge of prescience gets into the hands of a lot of people that don't know how to wield it, then that would just create more chaos. So I thought that concept of the Dune Tarot was really cool. So another thing that I took away from this novel was the decadence of empire. So the first novel takes place on Arrakis when there's no water, hardly. They have a very harsh sort of Spartan kind of society. But then in the second novel, when they've had this military success and they've sort of had spread their power across the human worlds, then they have suddenly a lot of wealth. And so what's lost in that? And that's really described in the book. A lot of their culture, the beauty of their particular culture gets lost in the sort of the decadence of empire as the empire sweeps in and changes their way of life. So yeah, the book is largely also about religion and government. I think there's a mixture of that, and they're combined here. But how both religion and government sort of control people, or work to control people's thoughts, and people give a sort of religious devotion to both in different ways, and sometimes they're combined as they are in this novel. So that was real cool too. So there's a couple of really nice quotes here that I wanted to read before I run completely out of time. The first one is, Paul is in the desert. He's in a sietch, which is it's a dwelling of the Fremen, the native people of Arrakis. They live in these rock dwellings underground because historically it's such a severe sort of climate. In the book too, there are cities and things too, Arrakeen, and water is not, because of the changes that the Empire has brought. But Paul is at this point in the novel, he is at a sietch, and he's looking out over the desert and sort of contemplating the beauty of it. So he says here, all it required was water and love. Life changed those irascible wastes into shapes of grace and movement, he thought. That was the message of the desert. Contrasts stunned him with the realization. He wanted to turn to the aides massed in the sietch entrance. Shout at them. If you need something to worship, then worship life, all life. Every last crawling bit of it. We are all in this beauty together. They wouldn't understand. Paul's saying, he knows they see him as a Messiah, but he's saying, worship life, the beauty of life. They don't understand because their planet doesn't have an abundance of life. And so he's trying to, he's hoping that they could see that, the beauty of life. I just thought that was such a beautiful quote. And then the second quote is, Paul is actually has woken up from a disturbing dream, and he's thinking about the sort of the life and death, and how nothing lasts, and how all living things die. And he says, the flesh surrenders itself, he thought. Eternity takes back its own. Our bodies stirred these waters briefly, danced with a certain intoxication before the love of life itself, dealt with a few strange ideas, then submitted to the instruments of time. What can I say of this? I occurred. I am not. Yet I occurred. I think that's so beautiful, I lived and then I died, yet I lived. I occurred. I am not. Yet I occurred. I just think that's so cool. All right. I really did enjoy this second book. It is, like I said, a continuation of the first. I have started the third in the series called Children of Dune, so that will be coming up. However, my next chat is going to be on Our Lady of the Flowers by Jean Genet, which I am more than halfway finished with, so I should have a chat on this coming up fairly soon. So until next time, take care.